Okay,
One more
got the
time.
notification.
Gosh, do I need to start over?
Probably a
If it
good
would be too
idea.
much to ask.
I don't mind.
So asking, Kevin, could you please start us off by telling us what WSFS stands for, who they are, and what they do?
Well, WSFS stands for the World Science Fiction Society, and that it has its own website, wsfs.org. Am I sharing that now?
You're sharing Topeka or Tonopah, pardon me.
Tonopah, actually. Zoom sharing is funny that way, but there we go. There we are. The World Science Fiction Society, which, and we are not going to spell it out every time. We're just going to call it WSFS. It's a lot easier that way. And technically, it is an unincorporated literary society. You should think of it as a club. And it is not some remote group, big corporation, entertainment company with a board of directors and stuff like that. It is the membership of the World Science Fiction Convention. If you join Worldcon, you become a member of WSFS, and the only way to join WSFS is to join the current Worldcon.
And to confirm, you join WSFS for the duration of your membership at a particular Worldcon, is that correct?
That's correct. Once you join that Worldcon, you are a member of WSFS for the term of that Worldcon. Now, this is sort of fuzzy at the edges because you do get some privileges that come with it that last beyond the end of that Worldcon, and I'll get into this later. Well, okay. You get we'll talk about that later because it has to do with the Hugo Awards. But in effect, the Worldcon is an ongoing convention, except every year's Worldcon is run by itself, run independently. But the members of that Worldcon become the members of WSFS. WSFS, you might say, is the ongoing body, but it doesn't really, it doesn't have a much of an ongoing nature. There's some things that, the only thing that's actually ongoing is the small part of the organization that maintains the trademarks on the word Worldcon and Hugo Award and stuff like that, because you couldn't have any individual convention own those, because it's a different group every year.
Mm-hmm. So that sounds a little bit like what KeyCon does here in Winnipeg, where basically the convention committees change every year, but there is a core organization who takes care of things like the copyright and that sort of thing.
There's something like that. I actually think it's actually even more analogous to the Olympic Games, although the Olympics have several more zeros tacked onto the cost at the end here. Because the International Olympic Committee does not run the Olympic Games. The IOC says, oh, Tokyo, you can hold the Olympic Games and you have to do it under these sets of rules. And we'll tell you what the rules are, and now you have the right to hold those Olympics. All of the work and all of the responsibility then falls upon that host committee. And it works like that, sort of. I mean, the more we'll get into it more when we talk a bit more about site selection, which is coming up later, as I recall. But it's more a case of WSFS doesn't do a whole lot other than set the ground rules under which an individual local committee runs the convention. And one of the most important things that it does, at least to the rest of the world, I suppose, is to hold the Hugo Awards. And over here next to me are a couple of them, or you might call 1.5 Hugo Award trophies. You see there the statue with the shiny chrome rocket ship on it. That is one of the display copy trophies from the 2002 World Science Fiction Convention, which I will keep calling Worldcon from here on, in San Jose, California, that it was my task to be the co-chairman of. And which I will say, that is not the recommended way to get yourself a Hugo Award trophy. It'll cost you a whole lot in time, money, and effort. It's much the other way of getting it awarded by the vote of the members is better. Next to it is the base, and that's because each Worldcon designs its own base. They all have to use the same trophy rocket, which is a standard design, but the bases are designed by each convention. In 1994, the Worldcon was in Winnipeg, and that was the design of the base, which the reason I have one of the bases is that I'm one of the people who designed it. along with Jeff Berry, Janet Moe, and Stan Philippon. So I got to keep one of the bases. So the Hugo Awards are presented by the WorldCon, but they aren't a separate entity. There's some people who might suggest, oh, well, the Hugo Awards must be somebody who comes in and holds it at WorldCon. No, the Hugo Awards are part of WorldCon the same way that your foot is part of your body. And your foot can't go walking off without you. The Hugo Awards were first presented by the WorldCon in 1953. Now, WorldCon itself started in 1939 and has been held every year except for a 3-year gap during World War II in different cities around the world, hosted by a different group of people. And in 1953, the convention that year thought it would be a good idea to give out awards. And at that time, and they were called the Science Fiction Achievement Awards. That was their official name. Now, they were not too long after that, in fact, probably the same year as I recall, they were informally being called the Hugo Awards. And Hugo is not an abbreviation.
No,
it's not. No, it's a name.
Yeah.
It's named after Hugo Gernsback, a founding, an important editor in the history of modern science fiction.
Yes.
And I mentioned that because a lot of people think it must be an HUGO award. I said, no, it's named after a person.
No, I highly recommend that anyone who has a moment look into Hugo Gernsback, because he was a pretty amazing individual.
He was a quite fascinating person. I agree with that. We only touch, just touch a little bit on the part in his involvement in science fiction. So the following year, 1954, they did not hold Hugo Awards, but the year after that, 1955, the committee said, no, we should go ahead and continue these Science Fiction Achievement Awards. And they continued in various forms and have been held continuously ever since, every year. And so you see, it's something the WorldCon does. It belongs to them.
Now, I have a quick question.
Yes.
Now, anybody can vote on the Hugo Awards. Is that correct? Who has a supporting membership in that year's WorldCon?
That's right. You have to be a member of the current WorldCon for nominating, and this is one of those residual rights I was mentioning earlier, is if you were a member of the previous WorldCon, you also get the right to nominate for the following year's Hugo Awards, but not to participate other than that.
Okay.
So if you join this year's WorldCon, which is in Washington, D.C., it's too late to nominate for this year. That the finalists have already been announced, but you will still get the right to nominate on next year's awards.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll go into the process of how the Hugo Awards voted on a bit there. But
a quick question now: what level of membership do you need in the WorldCon in order to vote in the Hugo Awards or to nominate for the following year?
It's called a supporting membership. That's the lowest level of membership in the convention. It's the least expensive. The prices are set by the individual committees. This year's convention set it at $50. And you can really consider that your membership dues to the World Science Fiction Society for that year. Now, just being a member doesn't give you the right to attend its annual convention. You do have to pay for the full attending membership. And this is sort of like being a member of a professional organization and attending its annual conference.
Conventions, yes. Two separate charges.
Two separate charges, one for your membership, one for the conference. Well, we do this the same way, but if you buy an attending membership, you could figure the first $50 of the attending membership is your dues to WSFS. And you have to be a member of the club.
Another quick question. If I recall correctly, reading the DISCON 3 website, if I have a supporting membership, I can vote for the Hugos and I can vote for site selection.
That is correct.
Actually, right, but you'll get into that later. The only question I had was, there was something about if you pay the additional $50 for the site selection fee, which comes to $100 total, that gives you an automatic supporting membership in the convention, whatever city has the convention for the next year. Is that correct?
Well, sure. And so why don't we just go ahead and we'll talk about site selection, because then we'll get back to how the Hugo Awards work more detailed. Every year's WorldCon chooses the site of the WorldCon to be held 2 years from now. This is a big difference from the IOC. This isn't where a board of very, very wealthy people say, okay, Tokyo or whoever, you do it. Okay, it doesn't work that way. It would be almost as if the athletes got to vote on where the Olympics were to be held, or something like that, if you like. Um, the members of the WorldCon, that is, of the members of WSFS, you get to vote on where to hold the convention 2 years from now. However, uh, because the members of the convention are the members of WSFS have over the years decided that anybody who wants to vote on that essentially needs to prepay their membership dues for that year, regardless of where it's being held. The assumption is the members of WSFS think have said that if you want to participate, you have to have some skin in the game.
You have to have a stake in the outcome.
You have to have a stake in the outcome. You pay that amount, which is set each year. So it does vary from year to year, but it currently runs in the neighborhood of $50.
Mhm.
That additional $50 is called an advance supporting membership, because whoever wins, and it doesn't even have to be somebody who's on the ballot. Okay, although it has been every year that I've been involved, and I've been doing this for 30 years. Whoever wins, you are now a supporting member and thus a member of the World Science Fiction Society for that year as well. So you've paid your membership dues in advance.
So even if Shangdu China wins, for example, if I paid
Yes.
my extra $50 for the supporting membership for 23,
Yes.
I will automatically be a supporting membership for the Shangdu convention, for example.
That's correct. That's correct. And then you will, if you wish to, you can then upgrade that to an attending membership by paying an additional amount of money beyond that. But you don't have to. You already have all your voting membership rights that way when you voted.
But if I wanted to vote again for site selection at the 23 convention, regardless of whether it's held, I would again have to buy a supporting membership for the 25 convention.
That's correct. You are buying 2 years ahead of time. Okay. So you actually get the phenomenon that those of us who participate every year, such as I do, we're always paying 2 years ahead of time. Once we got started on this, we're never paying for this year's membership or next year's membership. We're always paying for the 1-2 years in advance. So eventually you get to the point where, well, I'm just paying this, whatever I'm paying this year, that's for 2 years from now. So, and site selection, again, it's up to the members of the current WorldCon who have paid the advanced supporting membership and then expressed their preference on where the convention should be 2 years hence.
Would you take a moment, please, and explain the preferential ballot system? Because that could be confusing to a number of people.
Well, yes, preferential voting does tend to confuse people. There's a different name for it that perhaps makes it a little bit more comprehensible, and it's called instant runoff voting, or IRV, instant runoff. Now, in many elections with which I'm familiar that use just straight put an X and they count that, you often need to get a majority of the votes to win. And if nobody wins, then a runoff election is held. There are different ways of doing runoffs, and the way in which we do it is to do it by you expressing your preferences. So what you do is instead of having multiple rounds of casting ballots and coming back, we say, okay, look at your ballot, and there are choices on here, and there's write-in votes. You could write in something, and there's also a choice of none of the above, saying I don't like any of these candidates. And there are rules for how to choose a site if none of the above wins. They have not had to been invoked in my memory. Let me put it that way. But it's always there, and it means something. But anyway, I look at the ballot and I say, which one of these would I want to win? And you put a 1 by that candidate's name. And now you look at the ballot and say, if that candidate wasn't on the ballot, who would I want to win? I'll put a 2 by their name. And then a 3 if you have any further preferences. And you do that until either you get to the point where you said, I don't care, and then you stop marking preferences. Or if you run out of spots. So when you do that, I mean, it's not a points-based system or anything like that. When we count the votes, and I've counted them many times, we count all the votes by their first preferences. We take the ballot and say first preference is Winnipeg, and first preference is Chengdu, okay? And one for Memphis, and this one is for Zerps.
Yeah.
None of the above. Great. Okay. And so on. And we keep doing that until we have all the ballots. And then we count the votes. If any of these stacks has a majority of the total number of votes cast, we're done. That candidate has won. But if nobody has a majority, we then take whoever has the least number of votes. And in my hypothetical example, the write-in bid for ZERPs didn't have enough. We look at them and there might have been 3 people who took it. We looked at them and say, who's your second choice? And we now redistribute them. We put them to the other stacks. Unless they didn't mark anything else, in which case now they're out of the race. And that means the total number of votes has gone down. So the number you need to win goes down as well. But we'll just go ahead and redistribute them. We count the stacks again. Anyone got a majority, they win. Otherwise, who's in last place? You had a question, Jenny?
Yes, I do. When we're talking about majority, are we talking 51% or just or stronger than average?
No, no, 51% is not the same thing as a majority. And imagine that. I mean, a majority is the next highest number, whole number of votes that is more than half. That doesn't mean 50% plus 1. It means the next highest whole number. I mean, it's easy. If there's 100 votes, then it takes 51 votes to have a majority. That's the easy case. But let's say there's 101 votes. Well, 1/2 of 101 is 50 and a half. Okay. Well, you can't have a half vote. So it turns out in that case, 51 votes is still a majority because it's the next whole number. So if you like, we take the total number of votes, divide it by 2 and round up. That then if it's an even, actually, we divide it by 2 and it's an even number, you need 1 more. If it's an odd number, you need to round up once you've done, it's basically when you've divided it by 2, you have to round up. You follow me on that. So it's nearest whole number or next highest whole number that's more than half. I got a little off the rails there, but I hope that's clear. So we've been counting these stacks of votes and we're now at the second round and we still don't have a majority. So we take the last place votes and we look at all of them and we say, okay, what is your next highest preference? And we move them around again. And again, if you run out of preferences, they go off the board and we're done with it.
Okay.
And we keep doing this until somebody gets a majority. And now that might require eliminating everybody till you come down to 2. And when you're down to only 2 candidates, there's only 2 possibilities. And one of them is that somebody wins and the other is that there's a tie. There are tie-breaking procedures. But I don't want to go too much into the weeds there. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's unlikely, but it could happen. It just never has that I'm aware of.
I do have a quick question.
Yes.
Is there an average number of, in a sense, voting people at any given Worldcon? Like, are we talking in the tens or the hundreds, or?
Oh, it's in the hundreds to the thousands, and a lot of it has to do with how many people are members of the current Worldcon. For example, Winnipeg was selected to hold the 1994 Worldcon at an election, and in those years we actually selected sites 3 years ahead of time. So, but don't worry about that. But in that election, there were only 2 candidates in the race. The other one was Louisville, Kentucky, and there was a lot of interest in that race, and there were, I was one of the people who counted those votes. You see, I believe it was 2,107 ballots were cast. Mm-hmm. And Winnipeg won on the first ballot, but it was an extremely close race. It was the margin of victory for Winnipeg in that race was smaller than the number of people who had left their ballots blank, because
wow.
some people don't actually want to express a preference. They're just paying that $50 or whatever the fee was at the time. They're paying their dues 2 years ahead of time. They're not interested in the result of the race. They just want to be a member. They just want
the supporting membership regardless of who wins.
That's right. And they don't have a preference, and they can say that they can actually explicitly say no preference, or they can just leave their ballot blank. It's like an abstention.
And how long does it usually take from the time the last votes are cast, which I am guessing is at the Worldcon for this year? But right. How long afterwards will people know what the results for 2023 are? Is there an average?
Well, the official time is the following morning, which at a thing
Wow.
called the business meeting is the members of the World Science Fiction Society. Every member of the convention who's at there could actually go to this. It's like a gigantic town meeting where
Now,
every member
is that on the Sunday of the convention?
depends on what days the convention is being held.
But okay, so I should say, is it on the last day of the convention?
No, it is generally on the fourth day of the convention. The usual pattern for voting for a 5-day Worldcon is, first of all, you can vote in advance by mail. And then on the first, second, and third days of the convention, there's a desk called site selection where you can go and vote there if you have not voted already. And you can even carry ballots in for other people who have not sent them in by mail. You can do things like that. It's a fairly straightforward process. And
so basically, if you are mailing your ballot in, it has to be in by that day.
the actual deadline for when it has to be in is set by the administering convention. It is generally set a certain number of days ahead of the convention. It is not a postmark date. It would not be practical to wait because you'd never know what if something got lost in the mail. You generally end up saying, we must receive, if you're going to mail it, we must receive your ballot by this day to be sure that we count it. Now, I know from having done the job of being the administrator before, is the way I did it was when I stated that way, I said, we must receive it in order to be sure we will count it. If by some chance we receive it after that date, but before the convention starts or before the counting starts, we'll still count it. But you should not wait. Do not wait till it's too late because you run the chance of missing it. And indeed, there usually have been a handful of ballots that arrive in our box between the time we last checked the mail and the convention started, which usually isn't very long, but it does happen. So
the only option for people voting at a distance from DISCON 3 is mail it. Is that correct?
Yes, although the administering convention can work out things where you can, every convention's administrators, because again, there is no central office, there's no headquarters or board of directors. Every convention is responsible for doing the work, and a lot of the things involved are worked out between the administration committee, the subcommittee of the convention, and the bids to work out the actual mechanical details of how can the ballots be delivered. I mean, they may choose to say, okay, you could send a scan of your ballot by email. That was done a lot last year because the Worldcon was held completely virtually. And
so I was just going to say, so basically, what was I going to say? So basically, there's precedent, but there isn't a hard and fast set of rules about how it's handled. Okay.
Yeah. The one thing there is not a kind of electronic voting in the sense of you going to a website and clicking boxes on a website. That would require, I know that's not going to be done this year. To set up such a thing actually requires everybody involved to agree on a mechanism for it. That is not the system in use this year. It is a case of it's a ballot that you print out. It's available in a PDF form, or it will be rather once it's released. Hasn't been actually mailed. It hasn't been actually released. It can be mailed to you on paper. You fill it out and either mail it in or work whatever rules that convention is doing to send that in, and also to purchase your membership, your advanced supporting membership in that at the same time.
And DISCON has not yet announced how it's going to handle the actual ballots in that sense.
Correct. They haven't announced the specific mechanism for it. I'm aware that the talks have been held between the committees, but they needed to wait until everybody was on the same page, and we're pretty close to that point, as I recall. We are after the final technical deadline for having anybody else get into the conversation, so now we can actually start pinning it down. I did go on a bit on that, I admit, but it's just a case of this is why it's a very important thing here, especially when there are more than 2 candidates, and there are 3 candidates on this year's ballot. Your second place votes can make a big difference. I know about this. I really do. I know this very carefully. I was on the committee for bidding to hold the 1993 Worldcon in San Francisco, but it was a 4-way race. There were bids for San Francisco and for Phoenix And for Zagreb, which I believe was still in Yugoslavia at the time, I think that was before things broke up. I've forgotten now, I must admit. And then there was also a write-in bid, but it was a legal write-in bid. They had actually filed for the election. It just, they filed after the deadline for Hawaii. And they were a very strong candidate. There was a lot of support for them, for people who thought, "Oh, that would be a better choice than the others." Okay.
Mhm.
Well, when we started counting, I forget the exact number. There were fewer votes than the following year, but the convention was actually happening in the Hague, in the Hague, Netherlands. Um, there were a lot of votes for Croatia. There were a lot for Hawaii. San Francisco had the lead after the first round, but no bid had a majority.
Wow.
So nobody had a majority of all the votes cast. But after we had eliminated the other write-ins, which are usually jokes, and the people who'd voted none of the above, there weren't many of those. Once we'd eliminated those, the fourth place candidate was Phoenix. And so we then went through all the Phoenix ballots, because by the way, all of the bidding committees have people present in the room. We are watching the count going on. The administrators are in charge, but everybody is seeing all this, and so it's all above board and open. And if there's any questions, they're generally worked out right there on the spot.
Mhm. So basically, then you went through all the Phoenix ballots and took their second choices and
That's
redistributed them. Okay.
And San Francisco won after that was done. Okay, but it would not have won had a bunch of the Phoenix voters chose San Francisco as their second choice, because Hawaii came in third and then Zagreb after that. And by the way, of course, if we still hadn't had a majority, Zagreb probably would have been in last place based on where they were standing. We would have redistributed their votes as well.
Okay. So basically what you end up with are fewer and fewer and fewer piles of ballots.
That's right.
Until you reach the tipping point.
And so I want to stress how important it is when you're filling out your ballot, and this will come true with the Hugo Awards, which we'll talk about in a minute too. Your second and third place votes can make a big difference in these races.
Mm-hmm.
Don't just mark an X. They'll handle that. They'll count it as a 1. But then if your most favored candidate is now eliminated, now you have no further voice in the election. You should really seriously think about, if I can't get my candidate, if my favorite candidate doesn't win, who would I vote for on this ballot?
Yep.
And vote for second.
As you say, imagine that your favorite candidate doesn't exist.
That's right.
Who now is your favorite choice?
That's right. That's right. It's absolutely important.
And
it's
I
even
agree.
more important with the Hugo Awards.
and I agree that really in a situation like that, folks, second place votes matter. If you are thinking, well, Winnipeg isn't my first choice, please put a second, if we've won you over to that degree, because it could make all the difference.
And although I don't actually have these precise numbers with me here, I believe there has been at least one election in site selection history where the eventual winner was not the candidate who was leading at the end of the first round. It was the second place choice. It was the one who was running second at the end of the first round, but so many votes got redistributed from a lower candidate that the second place candidate won. And the key element of that is the result of the election is the candidate who is generally favored by the largest number of people who participated, even if they weren't their first choice.
Janny, do you have any other questions? That explains it pretty much for me. And I was really confused about what preferential voting meant. So thank you very much for Kevin for filling us in on that.
And that's why we call it instant runoff, because as you see here, we just have a series of runoff elections that are automated by your choices.
Exactly. And so it's not like you have to take a vote again. In the sense, you've already taken the vote again in advance.
That's right. That's right.
Since Janny isn't replying with anything, I did want to ask, coming into the Hugo Awards again, how pivotal was WSFS in starting the Hugo Awards, or did they come in at a later date?
I actually think in a way it works the other way around. Okay, the Worldcon committees, and I want to say even though the World Science Fiction Convention styled itself the World Science Fiction Society from the beginning, in many ways, it was very seat of the pants flying. You've only got a few hundred people were in the early World Cons, and they were a bunch of teenagers and 20 somethings for the most part, and they were just making it up as they went.
Well, yeah, because I think the first one was 120 people, the second one was 90, and then it started climbing from there.
Yeah, something like that. I think, yeah, there's only been one. It was the one you talked about with 90. There's only been one that was less than 100, but they were three-digit attendees, three digits of attendees. And WSFS was much more vague than Worldcon itself. And while there were attempts to sort of centralize WSFS into an organization, that sort of fell through. The people who attend and put on Worldcons don't actually like a lot of central authority. They're fairly independently minded. And so what we ended up with is a structure that is really odd. A lot of people have a hard time grasping the idea of an unincorporated literary society whose membership sort of moves around from year to year. I think of it as a town of several thousand people that appears Brigadoon-like in a different place every year for 5 days. And the Worldcon committees do almost everything that's involved, and even the things that have to do with WSFS, that those are mainly things where the rules of the society say, hey, Worldcons, you have to organize the Hugo Awards, you have to run the site selection, and you have to provide for the WSFS business meeting, which is a venue for all of the members who wish to participate in the process for making the rules for Worldcon.
Okay, here's the
And everything,
question.
yeah, I was just going to say, and everything else is up to you.
Who came up with the original set of rules for Worldcons? Like, did it come about very gradually over time? Like you say, a
it
seat of
came
the
up
pants
very
thing?
gradually. It came up very gradually. A lot of it was just that. This is one of the reasons why, if you go look at the Hugo Awards website, which is thehugooawards.org, and you go back and you look at the early categories that were there, each year's awards, you'll see that the categories themselves kept changing from year to year. They were because each committee was just making up what they wanted.
Kind of
Now, they weren't
amorphous.
very amorphous. They decided what awards they wanted, what award categories they were going to have. Okay.
Is that now
And then
standardized? Is that now
they are
standardized?
standardized.
Okay.
Starting in the 1960s, various sets of rules started happening. The members at the convention met and voted to adopt rules, and then they got a little bit more complicated, and they got more structure involved. The rules were then made so that in order to change these rules, you have to have an agreement at 2 consecutive Worldcons before they can be changed. And that's basically to make sure that no individual convention can just have, a whole bunch of my friends are going to come in and say, well, the rules now say I'm in charge and I'll always do it. That's a bad idea. It's not easy to get the rules to vote on award to vote on significant changes when the Worldcon is, well, even this year when it's in Washington, D.C., and next year it's in Chicago, but it's particularly hard when when one year it's in Dublin and the following year it's in New Zealand. Now, yeah, I know the convention was held virtually, but you get the point.
Yeah.
And we have a much more structured set of rules that came to the current form in the mid 1970s is when the basic structure settled down. So we've been doing it that's been there for about 40 years.
Okay. And as you say, it's actually really reassuring to hear that it's hard to change the rules because, I mean, or at least that you have to have a lot of support over a period of time to change the rules. So nobody can just arbitrarily say, I don't like this rule, I'm getting rid of it.
Absolutely. And one of the reasons y'all invited me here is I am into the rulemaking process. I have presided over the World Science Fiction Society's business meeting several times, including, I've lost track now, I believe 7 different countries, which is, I'm very proud of that, honestly, because I'm there to try and now the chair doesn't make the rules, he enforces them. I'm not the team captain, I'm the referee when I'm chairing.
You
but I've been
basically,
in-
you're the guy with Robert's Rules of Order, essentially.
I am, yes. But the point of Robert's rules is to allow everybody a fair chance to participate while protecting the rights of everybody. Rights not just of individuals or minorities, but also the right of the majority. Because in fact, a group of people, it's hard to describe this. A large group of people meeting to try and decide something. One of the things they have the right to do is to not have their time wasted. If a very large supermajority, defined as more than 2/3, said we've heard enough, let's move on to a vote, you can shut off the debate. Okay, that's a right of the majority. Okay, but by the way, under those same things, however, if you haven't heard from at least one person from each side, you can't shut off debate. So that's a right of individuals, if you say.
Mhm.
All right, so there's that. Yeah, I don't want to get too much into the business meeting because I could spend an hour talking just about that. But it's where the rules are made, and I'll freely admit that only a few hundred of the thousands of members of WorldCon regularly participate in that process. But the key thing is they are all eligible to. And one of the important parts about this, and the fact that any important change requires 2 years, is that let us say that the WorldCon this year were to vote to eliminate a Hugo Award category. And I'm not going to say which one, okay, because there are no proposals afoot for that. But they just say, we're going to strike out this category, and it passes. Well, the following year's convention in Chicago would have to vote again. And in the meantime, I'm pretty sure that all the people who thought that was a bad idea, but who don't show up regularly,
Have
would
mobilized.
show up.
Would
And
mobilize.
frankly, I've seen that happen because that happened in Montreal when I was presiding in 2009.
So basically, yeah. So it sounds like it sounds like a very solid system that has been worked up over a number of decades, and so
Absolutely.
it has proven worth in terms of how it functions.
Yes, it's intended to allow you to change things, but not too quickly. And in fact,
Mhm.
constitutions are not actually supposed to be quick to change. I will tell you, I know how frustrating this is. I have been one of those people frustrated by this slow pace of change. But when it comes to something as important as a basic governing document, we either have to have some sort of consensus or we got to stay right here.
Mhm. Coming back to the Hugos for a minute, have we
Yes.
already covered how the Hugo Awards process works when we talked about the preferential ballot system?
Actually, we did, but only in the sense of the final awards ballot. So let's start from the beginning. Around the first of each year, everybody who is a member, and that means at least a supporting member of the current WorldCon or the previous WorldCon, as of the last day of the previous year. And that's mainly so you can, here's the actual number of people who can nominate.
Now, when you say the last day of the year, do you mean the last day of the previous WorldCon or December
Of the previous
31st?
year. December 31st, the final
Okay.
year, the last day of the previous calendar year. Everybody who was a member of either of those conventions, and if you're a member of both, you still only get to vote once, okay? All of those people are now eligible to make nominations in all of the categories. Now, you're allowed to nominate up to 5 works or people, because there's some categories that are like for names of editors or names of artists or something.
And at this
I'm gonna
point,
say
and at this point, there's no ranking system. Is that
That's right.
correct?
It
It
doesn't
isn't 1,
matter,
2,
yeah.
3, 4. You're just sending in your 5 names.
there's 5 slots on the ballot, but they're not numbered and they're not ranked. And what happens then is the actual way in which nominations are tallied is a little bit complicated, and I don't really want to go into it, but it was adopted, first took effect in 2017. It used to be simpler, but it was people who were doing, well, if you like the Bodie McBoatface thing, we had to come up with a system that did not let you get swamped so easily with small numbers of votes. The system does, however, it's not truly weighted in that sense. The nominations are counted, and in a broad sense, the 6th, and I noticed I said you nominate 5, the 6th works or people with the most nominations are now finalists for the Hugo Award.
Okay.
Those are okay, and we list them, but they are not ranked by how many votes they received or how much support they had. They are listed. Okay.
Well, yeah, because you don't want to prejudice the vote.
That's it. Yes, indeed, there have been cases where the last place candidate, the one with the least number of nominations, is the one that actually won in the final ballots. We do find out after all of the elections are over, you get there's pages and pages of statistics about how many votes there were and how they were distributed. So, but the final ballot is announced, and the people there who were nominated are known as finalists, and they are, or if you like, they have been shortlisted for the Hugo Award. Then the final ballot comes out later.
And you do the preferential voting thing.
You have preferential voting, except there's one more candidate, and that's no award. You can vote for no award. It's a candidate, and if it wins, which has happened, and I've lost track now, it's happened over the whole history of the Hugo Awards. It's happened, I believe, 10 times. It might have been 12. I've lost track now. I will say 5 of the times it happened were in one particularly controversial year, which we don't need to go into now. Again, it's a whole different discussion. But if a candidate, but back in the 70s, there was a year where the members voted no award because they thought none of the finalists in, I believe it was Best Dramatic Presentation, they thought none of these movies or television shows were any good. They voted no award. But in general, we go ahead and go through the entire instant runoff process, and the same thing applies. First choice is what you like. Second choice is what if they weren't there, and you keep going until you either run out of choices,
or you just quit,
or you quit because you don't care anymore. There is no opportunity to write in. Unlike site selection, there are no write-ins on the final ballot.
Well, that makes perfect sense because, of course, you've already tallied up the votes for the finalists. There's no point in having a write-in candidate.
The nominating ballot is essentially 5 write-in votes, unranked write-in votes at the first stage to give you the first stage of it. There is no jury evaluating it. Or to put it in, I should have actually said, the final ballot, only the members of the current Worldcon get to vote on the final ballot. Okay. That's
basically, so basically, if you've paid your supporting membership, for example, to 2021 DISCON,
yes,
you get to vote on that year's Hugo Awards.
That's right, and the ballot will be out soon.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm sure some viewers are wondering how soon is soon. Are we talking a month? Are we talking a couple of months?
Did it already go out? I just realized it is out. I mean, they did. I'm sorry. I got. There's order of events because there's 2 things here. The ballot itself has been issued. And there was a second thing that only just now came out called the reader packet, which we'll get to in a moment.
Okay. Because I was just about to ask. To ask, what's a Hugo packet?
Yeah, but I will say, the ballot is out. You cast your votes. Voting closes in advance of the convention. This year, you've got an extra long amount of time to vote because the convention will be in December instead of August, September. And then at a ceremony at the Worldcon, the awards are announced and the winners receive a Hugo Award trophy is the Chrome rocket ship with the base designed by DISCON. And then everybody cheers and go off the party. So since the year 2011, there has been something called a Hugo voter packet. Now, it was originally organized as a private event. How to word it? It was a private organization by author John Scalzi, where the works that were finalists for the award, subject to the approval of the creators and the people who own the rights to those works, of course, were made into a package electronically.
Yeah. I was about to say physically.
Yeah, physically would be impossible. Of all of the works of the shortlisted works that were prepared to participate in this, because you don't have to. It's not required. This is not something that a Worldcon is required to do. Nobody has to put their work available in there, but it was made available to the members of the current Worldcon, who are the electorate that chooses those candidates. So in a sense, there is a jury. It just consists of the thousands of members of Worldcon,
who are also members of WSFS.
So the jury is the thousands of WSFS members. Okay, because you sometimes there are people called Hugo Award administrators They are responsible for the administrative tasks, the totaling of the ballots, the checking to see has this work that would have enough votes to be on the ballot. Was it published in the eligibility year, which is generally the previous calendar year? You know, is it the right length? I mean, because the fiction categories are defined by length of work and stuff like that. And in addition, we are required to ask potential finalists, do you wish to accept this? We don't have to wait. We don't have to wait forever. Okay. You have to be given an opportunity to decline. If you don't answer, we assume that, okay, you want to be. And now it's not 5 minutes, but it's also not 5 years because,
Yeah.
we can't find so-and-so. They're on a hiking trip in Tibet. And I'm not making that up. That happened once.
Really?
Yeah. It made the administrator's life interesting. I've been a Hugo Award administrator several times. Yeah, it gets a little interesting sometimes.
Do you have a lot of people say, I don't want to be involved?
It is rare, but I'd say we may average about one declined slot a year over the 20 plus years we've been allowing that. It used to be we didn't ask. That led to some controversy, and there was a case where someone won posthumously and their husband complained bitterly about it and refused to accept the award, saying, you should have voted for her when she was alive. Don't vote for her just because she died. And the members of WISPAS working through the business meeting said, you have a point. And we changed the rules to say, you must give people an opportunity to decline.
Or their, I would
Or in
imagine,
this
next
case,
of
it would
kin.
it'd be their next of kin or their literary estate holder or whoever the designated person would be. Basically, who would accept the award if they won? It would be the person declining.
Now, was that one of those things that went to a vote over 2 WorldCons?
Yes, that had to be. And that's the reason why when you'll see something happens that requires that drives a rules change. That's why if you look at the history of it, it's going to be probably a minimum of 2 years before you see any effect on the rules themselves, because it takes time to go through the process.
So that's definitely something that people should be aware of, is that these rules changes are not, on a dime.
No, and that's a key thing. The administrators don't make those rules up. They're just enforcing them, and they have nothing to. They're not there to judge the worthiness of a work. I mean, there are sometimes works that get on the final ballot where you have a large number of people screaming about, what a ridiculous thing. You must take it off of there. And it says, nope. We don't do that. We just count. We just count them. Okay.
And make sure that they are the right length, that they're the right length, that they're et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
That's right. All of those things. All of the stuff we do is technical as administrators. If you don't like what was a finalist, well, frankly, you should vote it. You should either leave it off your ballot entirely or vote it with a preference below no award. You should vote no award above if you think it's that bad. But your beef is not with the administrators. It's with the other members who nominated.
So basically what you're saying, in effect, is that the administrators are in no way making any artistic distinctions.
No, absolutely. I'll tell you, as an administrator, it's relatively rare for things that I am personally fond of to make the ballot or win. It's the exception more than the rule. That's just,
but that's only fair. I mean, you want to keep at that level of the administration, you want to keep any artistic consideration at all out of it. You're just looking at technical considerations. Like you say, is it the right length?
Solely technical.
Was it published in the right year?
I would never want to make those decisions for the whole society. It's hard enough making those decisions on my own ballot.
Yeah, I mean, so basically, it's not a juried show, is what you're saying.
It's not a juried show. It's not at all. Okay, I got back to the voter packet. The key thing on that, after John Scalzi kicked it off, WorldCons after that began organizing it. It has become a traditional but not required process. It takes a lot of work. It's a whole lot of work. There are a lot of categories. There are a lot of finalists. Contacting them all and saying, would you be prepared to make your shortlisted work, or in some cases, samples of your work for things like artists or so on, available to our members for free, essentially. Nobody's required to do that. Some people don't want to do it. Some people aren't allowed to by whoever owns the rights to their work. Okay. But to the extent that it can be done, it is done. And this year's Hugo voter packet has been recently released. Messages have been sent to the members of the world of this year's Worldcon saying, here is how you get your voter packet so you can get all this material and read it. The one thing to be said about postponing the convention to December, but announcing the short list at the normal time, which is usually in April, is that you have a lot longer to read.
Yes, and in something like the Hugos, there's a lot of material.
There is a great deal of material, and if you haven't read all of these works already, and I think it's quite rare for anybody to, for all of the works that they presumably read the works when they nominated them, but for also it'd be very rare, in fact, for all of the work and for all of the works you nominated to make the short list.
Yeah,
not with thousands of people participating.
Exactly. So would you say overall that people are more involved with the Hugos than they are with site selection?
Yes, absolutely. There are more people, there are almost inevitably more people participating in the Hugo voting process than are voting in site selection. Now, I'd say one of the things about that is that there is that extra barrier. You're having to pay your
In
membership
advance.
dues tiers in advance. Okay, that stops people. Particularly if you are not somebody who goes to Worldcon every year. I mean, I've attended every Worldcon personally. I've been at every one of them since 1989. I would have gone to New Zealand if it had been possible to do so.
Yeah, but
I took 5 days off from work and was right here where I'm sitting now. But well, not 5 days, 3 days, weekend. Sorry, you know what I mean. But not everybody has been to Alden, although there are actually a fair number of people. I know some of them personally who've been to more Worldcons, certainly been to Worldcons much further back than me. They go back into the 60s and earlier.
Yeah, I mean, I think what people have to keep in mind here, for those watching who aren't aware, is that if Winnipeg whoever gets the Worldcon in 23 will be hosting the 81st Worldcon.
That's
This is not a flash in the pan. This has been going on for decades and decades and decades.
Yeah.
And and if you take part in this, which I highly encourage people to do, you're taking part in a venerable institution of fandom. You are becoming part of WSFS, and you now have a voice and a vote, not only in the Hugo Awards, but if you paid the supporting membership 2 years in advance, in site selection for 2 years in advance.
Absolutely.
That's a lot.
And if you are not somebody who values that, I value it highly.
So do I.
Yeah. Okay. If you're not one of those people who wants to keep doing that year after year, and if you're just you might not go to Worldcon except when it happens to be convenient for you, and that's nothing wrong with that. One of the reasons we move the convention around is so that it's closer to different people around. We had thousands of people in Dublin and in Helsinki, all these thousands of people, many of whom had never had even an opportunity to get close to it before. And that's a good thing, in my opinion. But if you're not really interested, let's say if you were looking at the ballot and said, I don't care who's involved in that, and I don't really value the voting on the Hugo Awards, that's up to you. Then you might not want to participate in the voting. Okay, that's to be honest. But I encourage somebody who's interested in the Hugo Awards and being a part of the process, vote every year and pay that minimum amount, because that's the lowest cost you're ever going to get to just pay your dues years ago.
So basically, what you're talking about there is the supporting membership in the current year's Worldcon.
Yeah, well, you're buying the convention, the supporting membership to start with. Now go ahead and vote. Now you're buying your supporting membership the 2 years hence Worldcon.
Exactly, which at this point, supporting membership for DISCON is $50 USD at this point. It has been decided that the supporting membership for 2 years in advance is another $50 USD.
That's correct.
But for $100 USD, you get voting in the Hugo Awards, you get the Hugo package, which might be worthwhile in itself, and you get the site selection vote for 2023. What else do you get?
You also get to nominate for next year's Hugo Awards.
Right. That's an awful lot for $100. That's a lot.
And because you're now a member of the 2023 Worldcon, no matter who won, and you get to nominate for the 2023 Hugo Awards, and you get to vote on the 2023 Hugo Awards final ballot, and you're eligible to participate in the site selection for the 2025 Hugo Awards.
If you pay
another
your supporting
advance
membership another advance fee for 2025. And that
That's
amount might change. It might not be $50 USD, but for
Yes.
this year, the whole package is $100 USD minimum.
That's right. And that gets you basically all the rights for 2021, where we are now, and all of the rights associated with the 2023 WorldCon.
And you become a member of WSFS.
And you become a member of WSFS for all of the rest of this year, and then also for 2023.
Which also
There's a gap
means,
in the middle, so you'd have to join Chicago's WorldCon and then
yeah,
fill in the gap, but that's different.
which if you're a member of WSFS, if I understand correctly, that
Yes.
means that you are also eligible to vote at things like a general meeting, for example.
That's correct. Every attending member, that is the one distinction. You do have to be at the convention to participate in, if you like, the town meeting.
Mhm.
Where every member of WSFS who wants to participate can be there and can, within the constraints of time and so on, not space. Theoretically, it's the only program item that you can't be kept out of.
Now,
That's
and
a
that,
different story. But you get to
yeah.
vote on you get to debate, listen to the debate, and vote on the decisions before us.
And that is an in-person event only, is that correct?
That is an in-person event only. It is recorded. There are recording. If you would go to the YouTube WorldCon events channel, you could find recordings of past business meetings. It does take quite a bit of time because, well, to be honest, it's direct democracy. It's not a town council where you're trying to convince 5 people up on the head table to make the decisions. This is direct democracy. Nobody
Athenian,
represents you.
True Athenian democracy.
Show up and vote. That's how it works.
Yeah. And how do you become a male Athenian? You become a member of WSFS. And that entitles you to vote.
That's right.
So there you go. So I mean, from the sound of it, I highly encourage people to get both the supporting membership at DISCON 3 and to pay in advance for 2023 because of all the tremendous value it gives you. You can go to the DISCON 3 website. I believe it's discon3.org.
Yes.
Yes.
Discon3.org. Yeah.
Numeral3.org. Yeah, and from there you can go to the membership site and choose your level of membership. You can pay supporting first if it's better for you financially, and then pay for the additional 2023 supporting membership later, or you can do it all in one go. What is now again, if someone buys their supporting membership for DISCON 3 and they then decide, I really, really want to vote in site selection. What is the latest they can buy the 2023 supporting membership?
Well, believe it or not, at the convention itself.
But does that count electronically?
Well, and in that case, if you're sending it out electronically, they will set the deadline, and I don't know, and they have not set the exact deadline.
Okay.
It's usually a relatively short time before the convention starts, a week or so, to give the time to get it coming in. But in fact, you can, if it turns, let's say you miss that deadline, but you happen to know a friend who is going, you could go ahead and fill that ballot out and include the money and give them an envelope with your ballot, and they could deliver it on your behalf. I have done this. I even had one case when I was in Yokohama at the WorldCon in Japan. I had a friend contact me who had forgotten to mail his ballot in, and he said, "Oops, if I were to fax you my ballot with my credit card information on the ballot, because you're usually allowed to vote, would you go deliver it to site selection for me?" And I did. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So there are options.
There are options up until the very last moment, which is probably, but not absolutely, probably 6 p.m. on the third day of the convention, which this year would be Friday, because the convention is Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So,
but DISCON has not yet announced that. So it could change.
Have not announced it could change. They might keep it open a little later. It's usually around that time.
Okay.
And then after we're done, all the bids and the administrators go to a conference room or whatever, and they start counting ballots. Now, you ask when the results are official once the business meeting receives them. That's the nominal official. It's sort of like in a horse race. That's when the sign lights up that says official, and they'll pay off the tickets.
Okay.
On the other hand, it is not unusual to find out. There is no rule saying you can't tell people, although there's sometimes informally you will just say, could you like hold off saying anything for 2 hours so we can go let the others know and stuff.
Yeah.
But so yeah, you'll if you have an ear open late on that evening, you will be able to find out what the results are.
Okay. Now that's the end of my questions. Kevin, did you have anything else you wanted to add before we close?
Oh, I've went on longer than I ever should expected, but I will say that there is so much information about the Hugo Awards over at thehugoawards.org. And if you have a look at the site and you still have questions about how the Hugo Awards work, you can write to info@thehugoawards.org. And Muggins here will be the person probably answering that email.
Now, in terms of site selection, if people have questions about that process, is there a place they can go to find out more?
For that, for how the process works, you need to go to the discon3.org website and search for the information about site selection. And I just realized I should have looked that one up. It is on their website. It's not at the top level, but it's part of their WSFS material that they have. You have to
Yes,
ask
wrapped up
this
with
year's
WSFS. And
Yeah,
it's in the What's On, I believe, tab.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I thought that might be it, but I didn't want to say for sure. Go to the What's On tab. You go ahead and go down there, and you have to contact them because they're administering that. And I will say, any specific administrative details about this year's Hugo Awards, you need to write to this year's Hugo administrators. At the Hugo Awards website, we don't run the awards. We're the site of record. We can answer general questions, but not specific ones.
So they'd have to go to DISCON and whoever's managing it for DISCON.
That's right. DISCON set up a small committee called the Hugo Award Administrative Subcommittee. And the key thing about that is the people who are on that committee were themselves ineligible to be finalists for a Hugo Award.
Yeah, makes sense.
They're firewalled off from it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons for that is that there are often people who are volunteers on a WorldCon committee who are themselves potential Hugo Award finalists. And so you want to there's a firewall there.
Yeah, you don't want to cross the streams on that.
But yeah, there's information at worldcon.org and wsfs.org about those sites as well. And that's it on that.
Okay.
I'm curious if we've had any other questions.
We do have one thing to note before we sign off, Lori, is that DISCON 3, their hotel reservations to the general membership open up tomorrow. That's a very key date.
Very key, yes. So if you want to go to WorldCon this year, get your web browser fired up and get ready to get your hotel reservation because there are not an infinite number of those rooms.
No, it's not like the TARDIS.
No, it's not.
No, they only have a certain number.
Right.
Okay, Kevin, did you have anything else to add, or Jani, did you have anything else at your end?
Nope, that's all I had. Thank you.
That's all I have as well.
I just want to say thank you very much for letting me go on much longer than we originally planned, but I enjoyed it, and I want people to be involved. I hope that you understand my enthusiasm for it. I've been doing it now since I first attended WorldCon when I was 19 years old in 1984. I went to the business meeting, not knowing a whole lot about it, and that was my first participation in WSFS, where I moved to adjourn the first day's meeting, and that's it. Oh, and 10 years later, I presided over the meeting. So there you go.
There you go. There are opportunities for advancement.
There are. It's an all-volunteer organization, after all.
Yep. Well,
and I hope to see a lot of people there in DC this year.
I would like to thank you very much, Kevin, for providing us with all this very valuable and information, which really cleared up a lot of my questions. Me speaking as a person who didn't know a whole lot about the process. So nope, you answered. I understand now. Thank you so much. I would like to remind our viewers to check our YouTube channel, which is titled Winnipeg in 23 Bid, and our website for more information in the coming week. And that next weekend, we will be holding a short Twitch TV broadcast at 1 p.m. CDT before hopping over to Discord for a social. So come on down to the social on Discord, meet Winnipeg Bid Committee members, ask questions and chat with your fellow fans. It's going to be a lot of fun. So please watch the main website blog for details on that. Once again, Kevin, thank you so much. You have provided us with some very valuable information. Jani, thank you for running the pass, as they say in the restaurant industry. And on that note, I'd like to say, take care, everybody.
And I do want to thank everybody who was working behind the scenes, because we had Carl, who is further behind the scenes and not on camera and not on sound. The folks who keep the magic happening are very important to this.
The tech fairies are essential to what we're doing here. So thank you very much, Carl, as well. And on that note, take care, everybody. Stay safe, and we will see you all again soon. Thanks for watching, everybody. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to make sure you don't miss a minute of the excitement that's coming up from the Winnipeg in 23 Bid Committee. For a truly stellar 81st World Science Fiction Convention experience, vote Winnipeg in 2023 for a venue that offers all the big city conveniences combined with the best of hometown hospitality.